There are many things keeping our housing shortage, well, short. There's the tension between state power and local control, the soaring costs of land and labor, the bureaucracy, and plenty of disagreement about what kinds of housing, if any, communities would sign off on or the state wants to push for. And smack in the middle of that process is having the money to get going at all. The Boston Globe called it the $600,000 problem, the cost to build a single unit in Boston. So if a developer can't find sources for that, even projects people are enthusiastic about can sit in development purgatory, and the capital problem is especially acute for minority and low-income developers. I'm Jennifer Smith, and this is the Codcast, CommonWealth Beacon's podcast about policy and civic life here in Massachusetts. Today I'm joined by Moddie Turay, President and CEO of the Massachusetts Housing Investment Corporation, or MHIC. Earlier this year, Mass Housing and MHIC announced a new $50 million Equitable Developers Fund, providing enterprise-level financing to active developers from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds and communities. It's the largest publicly led financing program of its kind in the country, so what could that actually do to make a dent in the state housing crisis? Moddie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. Really appreciate it.
So, starting from the largest possible place here, how would you describe the current state of housing in Massachusetts?
Wow, toughest question. I think the current state of housing in Massachusetts is that we have a housing problem at all levels. We have an affordable housing problem, we have a workforce housing problem, and we have a market rate housing problem. And I think most people, even though we are primarily in the business of affordable housing, would say, well, why are you talking about market? But if you can't solve for your market rate housing, it will end up putting pressure, as it has in Massachusetts, downward pressure on your workforce housing and your affordable housing. So what was once a starter home in years past is no longer a starter home. It doesn't exist in many communities in Massachusetts, and that's where I think we're struggling.
I love that you brought up, of course, the mix issue here, because you do often see these affordable housing versus market rate housing issues as sort of inherently described as in conflict. And on a literal level, you can understand that if there is a unit that is market rate, it is inherently not an affordable unit. But how do you think about that healthy mix? Do you think that there's been a lot of focus on kind of the concept of just developing affordable housing without considering that market rate component, or has there been enough enthusiasm on kind of both fronts?
Well, two things. One is I think about it from the perspective of community. And when we think about it from that perspective, I want to see a thriving community. So that means I want to see diversity of housing, diversity of income, diversity of culture, race, all of these things I want to see in a thriving community. I think if you just look at it as an affordable housing problem, you will see you're just trying to solve for housing, and you're just like four walls and a roof, and we end up concentrating that housing into specific communities and or neighborhoods, and not thinking about how are we building a thriving community. So that's how I look at it. Now, from that perspective, I think that, making sure that we, the things that a neighborhood consists of, a healthy community consists of, access to healthy food options, access to healthy healthcare options, access to great education options. When you start looking at that from perspective, you can't just force yourself into four rooms in a house. So what we try to do here at MHIC, and I think with this, what a lot of us in our ecosystem are trying to do is like, what happens to the people after we give them the keys to their new home? What's their life look like after that? And that, to me, is the determinant of success. So yeah, I'd say that. I was going to say maybe the second part of that, and just in terms of concentrating, is really just focusing on that healthy balance comes from, I would say this, what some people are forgetting is that when they hear affordable housing in this day and age, when we start to think about those three buckets, affordable housing, market rate housing, workforce housing, a lot of people that say it's not in my backyard, quite frankly, at this day and age, what they mean is it's not just like Section 8 housing. You're really talking about like your coworker that you go to work with every day that you like, your son or daughter, your grandkid. Now they can't live next to you in your community because it's too expensive. And I think that that's so not in my backyard. It's to me, it's almost saying that I don't I don't want my kids, I don't want my grandkids, I don't want my coworker, I don't want the firefighter and or nurse to live in my neighborhood. And I don't think many people want to say that.
Yeah, it is a complicated dynamic, and you see those sorts of discussions come up often at the community level where there is simultaneously an ask to say, well, I want to be able to have my kids or my grandkids live near me, but if you're restricting the total housing stock, then the question is, well, where are you just turning one house over and over many generations? I guess kind of the last thing on the broad level here, because we're going to get into specific issues and barriers to building affordable housing and developing affordable housing. So there are a lot of reasons why affordable housing might not be built, and some of it has to do with there being issues around land acquisition, some of it has to do with construction, some labor. So to kind of piece apart what it is specifically about affordable housing that runs into these particular challenges as distinct from market rate housing, what are these areas that you're really kind of focused on?
So, I mean, we're focused on someone asked me about like what do I think about how the state is doing, and I said I think they're doing a fantastic job. I think that they're looking at it as we should, which is like what's that movie? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once,
All at once.
right? That's kind of how I think we have to look at it. I think the problem is everything that you've just mentioned. I would say in some cases, actually, given all the subsidy that's needed for affordable housing, in some cases, it costs you more to build an affordable unit than it does a market rate unit. So that's a problem. I look at that as at some point, it's going to cost us so much money to build a single affordable housing unit that I wonder if municipalities, will lose, I don't want to say lose interest in doing it, but you would not be able to, you can't justify the cost. And the cost is rising for construction costs, for interest rates, and then there's always a gap in affordable housing. So the state has to come out with additional dollars and additional program. There's the federal programs. We are the largest nonprofit low-income housing tax credit syndicator in Massachusetts. So we've got those funds. But when you've got deals that have like 20, 30 levels of like gap filling in it, I mean, how long does that go for? That worries me. When I maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, people were worried that, oh, well, it costs now $550,000 to build an affordable housing unit. And today, now it's like 800,000. And you're like, so just imagine, is it 2, 3 years from now? We're talking about $1 million to build an affordable housing unit. At some point, someone's going to just raise their hand and say, would it be better just to give people a couple $100,000 to go, it's a down payment to a home. So those are issues that I worry about, but I do think it's everything that you just mentioned.
So one of the reasons that we're here today is to talk about not just the people who are in the homes, but also the folks who are building them. So a Grove Impact Report last year identified the real estate development industry as a potential industry to build wealth for Black and Hispanic Americans, noting that they make up less than 1% of that industry. Overall, this might be a bit of an on-the-nose question, but why does that matter? Why is that something that should concern people?
If we can recognize that we have a problem, and it's really one of supply. We have the demand. We know that by 2030 that we need to have another 200 or so thousand units into the marketplace. And we know that builders, real estate developers, et cetera, are the ones that are doing it. And we also believe that we should be building thriving communities. I think that we have to empower number one, for a thriving community, the people that actually live in these communities that we want to see housing built in. And I think that, as a result of that, that means that we have to empower means allowing them to have access to capital. So because they're going to be the first ones to see that, oh, there's an opportunity for a coffee shop here. Oh, we need more housing that looks like X. we need more, retail that looks like X. And so I look at it and I say, and what mass housing I think has really been great at is they, they did a roadshow throughout the state, talked to a lot of underserved developers and people that are socially and economically disadvantaged that are in the real estate industry. And the biggest thing that came out of that study, from even talking with groups like the Builders of Color, is lack of access to capital. So what we've done, mass housing and us, is to say, okay, great. So let's solve for that. And I'll just tell you, I've been a real estate developer for years too, and I've been in the real estate industry for a long time. We've said that forever in a day. And I won't say no one's done, but not many have stepped up to say, okay, great. They'll say, we'll give you money for your deal if you can meet these hurdles. And they're saying, and then they wake up, 10 years later and they say, well, why haven't we built these wonderful companies? Those companies are on the sideline going, I can't hire staff. I can't build capacity in order to take on the opportunities that are out there. And I can't do all of these things to get the dollars that you want to give me as an investment. So the Equitable Developer Fund that was founded by Mass Housing is like just doing away with this chicken and egg thing and saying, okay, let's invest in these companies. Let's give them the ability. What people don't think about is to do affordable housing projects. In order to access low-income housing tax credits and new market tax credits and all these government subsidies, it's an entire ecosystem of consultants and this and that. And you need resources to do that. Affordable housing is not a cheap industry.
So exactly to your point, for plenty of people, they might hear capital issues in development and go, I don't even know where to start with processing what that means. So if you could walk me through kind of the experience of one of these potential developers or kind of a category of developers that would be targeted here from these underrepresented groups, what does it look like? They're looking around their neighborhoods or they're looking to start a business, and where do they start to see these hurdles arising? And then where does the Equitable Developers Fund want to kind of come in and alter that process?
Great question. So I think the starting place for us is that you have to have completed at least one project. That could be a single family home. It could be a multifamily development, a mixed-use development with ground floor retail and residential above. And then you have to have one in your pipeline that's coming up. And I'll answer the question in two ways. I think where people start to see the problem is that they might have done that one deal. And the way that a development cycle works is like, if you wait for one project to finish before you start another one, chances are you're gonna go out of business unless you come from a wealthy family and or have, friends and family money. So where people run into the issue is the hardest thing you can do in real estate is your first deal. You're having to prove to everybody that I can do this. So what we're doing is coming in after you've done that, because as Crystal Cornegie will tell you, the head of Mass Housing, we want our money back. It's a loan. So we want people who have experience that have proven to the marketplace, if you will, proven to us that they are committed and they've gone through an entire real estate project. And then we're stepping in and saying, we see you. And now, in order for you to do your next project, we know that we are going to now give you agency, give you capital to now hire maybe a new staff person to come in and fund consultants so that you can not just do your next project, but actually map out what's the next 2 or 3 or 4 projects look like for you. Now you have the ability to go out and maybe acquire another property, so that you're able to actually build your business. When I was starting, it was like the business plan was such that it's like one project under construction and one on the way. If you broke that cycle, you're basically going to go out of business. And so what we are trying to do is make sure that that cycle is continuous and that we give people the ability to continue to grow.
And so why the focus on underrepresented groups? Is it thinking about kind of trying to make sure that the market is more equitable? Are there differences in the sorts of projects or in the areas where these developers are looking to break ground? Help me frame that out a little bit.
So I think it's all of what you've just said. I think it has to be equitable, period, right? We should all be in the business of making sure that there's equity in the way that our systems are working. And I think that equity is not just so we can wake up in the morning and say, oh, there's equity, even though that would be great. But it is because I think we have to be, what is the movie again? It's like everything, everywhere, all at once. We need everything, everybody working on all cylinders. 200,000 units is a lot by 2030. And if we also at the same time, which the governor, the lieutenant governor, and secretary of housing, Ed Augustus, if you listen to them, that's what they're saying. They're like, how do we not just get housing, but how do we build communities? And I know I said it earlier, but it's super important. It's like the front line of those communities are the people that are living there. You know, some people make the mistake of going to a community after they hear about a rail line or something opening there or public transportation and go there almost like they've discovered it. Meanwhile, it's been there forever, right? Those people are there. They know what's best for their communities. What we're trying to do is say, here's resources to now empower you because you're going to get there before we do. And we need you to get there before we do because we don't have the resources to do that. And we've got a problem coming in 2030. And if we don't solve that problem, what we think is a bad problem now in terms of housing costs will be even worse. So we're trying to empower everybody to get into the boat and start moving towards this goal.
So the question of scale is a really interesting and complicated one here. So I think it's $50 million is the scale of the EDF, which would make it the largest program of its kind in the country.
Yep.
But then you also have that kind of split brain side, which is it is so expensive to build housing. You are going to be kind of limited in scope here. So how does that number manifest, essentially? What is the hope for how many companies, how many developers this could help? Is there kind of a thought about what sort of carve into that 200,000 units by 2030 we could make? Because the difficulty with a lot of these new proposals when people are trying to get their head around, well, just what will this do, is that you can end up with sort of complicated discussions about, well, accessory dwelling unit as of right zoning, even if you like it, might then only create less than 10,000 units in this kind of 10-year period. So when people are trying to get their heads around what does $50 million in this mean? What does it do? How would you explain that?
Well, I think I would explain it by, we know that there's an absolute need for these dollars. And I think we know that because we've launched this program now, I think it's been about 2 weeks. And what we thought were the numbers of applicants we were going to get, I think we're now 3 times that. So I think what I would say for right now is that we have to assess how the program is doing over a short period of time. And I think we all have, you know, we would love to be able to say it's going to be 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 units. But the honest answer is we believe that it's going to be significant and that we have to continue to, you know, take in the applications that we're getting now with an eye on groups that we think that could really actually put a dent into that 200,000. Also, I should mention that Mass Housing will be taking on the technical assistance aspect of that. So also not just saying, here's money, I'll see you later, pay me back on such and such date, but to say, how can we help you grow? What is it that you need support on? And let's help you do that. And let's help you, you know, grab consultants to help you build this capacity. So we're actually trying to, it's not dollars, that's what I call and what we call in our industry smart money. So I would just say, I think that it is that we're moving this program forward. I think it will be successful. And I think that we're going to have to come back with what we think this big number is, or the number of units that the overall 50 million will take. But I do think it's going to be more than even we're thinking. And what I hope is that it's getting the flywheel started for these groups. Every real estate developer, not every, but almost, at least unless you come from money, you're starting with 1 or 3 flat, and then I've seen a ton grow to 100 or so. So our program goes from someone who's, you know, has done a, you know, single family home to someone who's maybe coming in and their second deal is like 100 units. So we're really trying to cover the range. And I think that that's why it's difficult to give a number. But I do think we will be able to do that in a short while. And I'm excited about it, what the program will do.
So what is the rough number of applicants you expected? Because that's great. You said you've gotten much more than expected.
Well, I mean, for us, I think it is much more than we expected, meaning on day one, I think we're well over 45 applicants that we've got in now. And those are still coming in every day. So I think if you look at even the list of people that Mass Housing have talked to during their roadshow, if you will, where they were talking with socially and economically disadvantaged developers, probably somewhere around like 427 developers. So I think that speaks to the strong number that we're getting in and continuing to come in. So yeah.
So before taking this role, you were focused on housing and economic development in Detroit. Don't think I missed 3 flat coming out of your mouth. We say triple decker, 3-decker here. I have no business saying that. I'm from California. But so I was wondering, how does Massachusetts housing strategy kind of compare? Are there lessons from Detroit to keep in mind, or things that it did well, or you were like, this is a totally different ecosystem, no comps?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes and no. I think Massachusetts has maybe arguably the most robust affordable housing ecosystem in the country. That's just what it is. I think that what we have here, the resources we have here, the coordination we have here is pretty amazing. Detroit's a different animal because we were trying to rebuild a city, rebuild a market. Whereas in this market, you don't think about it, but a market could actually work too well, right? That sounds crazy. So we were on the other end in Detroit. We were trying to get this market started versus being here in Massachusetts. And if someone said, oh, the market is working too well, you're like, what do you mean? Well, if vacancy is so low, that can actually cause a problem in the market, what we're experiencing now. So in terms of comparison, on the one end, there's kind of no comparison between the two in some respects. There's a lot of lessons learned, I would say, maybe for Detroit and the growth that I think they're experiencing and will continue to experience. But I do think the focus out of necessity on community is something that, Massachusetts could even look at Detroit and say, those are actually good ideas. I think in some respects, Detroit's had to do some of these things out of necessity. Like you're rebuilding a neighborhood, you're rebuilding a market, you have to ask yourself, well, what does that mean? What do you need in it? Is it close to public transportation? Is it close to a hospital? Is it close to a grocery store? So, because you've got so much land. And so I think as a result of that, my focus, even here now at MHEC around community, is really because of my experience in Detroit. And it's like, it's not enough to just solve for 200,000 units in 2030. But if people wake up in the morning and they're not surrounded by community, they don't feel one with where they're at, I don't know that that's success for us. I don't think that that's what I consider to be a thriving community. That also goes to ultimately Massachusetts' ability to attract people to the state. If you look at what we're losing now, we're losing people between 25 and 44 years old. Those are the people you actually want to keep in your state, in your city, in your neighborhood. And that's, I would imagine, obviously in part because of housing cost.
I'm so glad you brought that up, in part because over the past week or so, there have been a number of discussions from kind of the business community perspective, from sort of the pure academic perspective, from the policy bureau research perspective, and consistently we're seeing now that housing is being listed as more of a problem for businesses than, say, during the pandemic. The major issue was just finding people to fill roles. Like it was a real labor shortage issue. So I think this is kind of maybe the note to end on here, which is when you're thinking about how essential a healthy housing ecosystem is, you're focused on the capital side of it, but what other moving parts are you keeping an eye on? Because it's one thing if there's capital and there's resistance to build on the community level. It's one thing if there's capital and there's limited land available. It's one thing if there's capital and it has to, be routed through some smaller projects but not larger projects. So what are you keeping an eye on in dynamics going forward?
That's a great and interesting question. I would say this to end is health is what we're looking at. Health outcomes specifically. And so we have a healthy neighborhood equity fund. And that fund, we're on now Fund 2. Fund 1 was about 20 or something million. Fund 2 was like 42, 41 or so million. And that fund is in partnership with CLF, the Conservation Law Foundation, and United Health was our largest investor in that. I think they invested 25 million into that fund because they're concerned about health outcomes. So we do a health score. We look at walkability. We look at proximity to healthy food options. We look at all these things that we think make up for a healthy neighborhood. So when I say community, I'm not just saying it like, oh, that's what we should be working on. I literally mean like we are focused on it in a real and meaningful way, that we're putting significant capital into projects that score well on the health outcome side of things. And that's why, I say all these things about community, because I'm like, that's what makes for a great community. And if you, in public transportation and walkability, the ability for a single mom, if you will, to be able to take their kid to school, go to work, go to the grocery store, and get back home with enough time to actually spend time with their children, that is what I think the dream is in a lot of respects. And that's what I think we're shooting for, is like, what's not just healthy and just ranking health from having a roof over your head, which is super important, but health in terms of your surroundings. And does your surroundings, when you step out of your door, does that fuel you? Does that give you a longer lifespan? Does that give you a healthier way of living? And that's important.
Thanks again to Moddie Turay, President and CEO of the Massachusetts Housing Investment Corporation, for joining me this week on the Codcast. Thank you for listening. I'm Jennifer Smith. Our producer is John Gee. Leave a rating and review wherever you're hearing this now if you want to help everybody else find us, and email codcast@commonwealthbeacon.org if you ever want to get in touch directly. We'll be back in your ears next week.